But to get to my number one,
Do you want to announce the number one at the same time?
yeah, sure. I mean, it's
Yeah.
no surprise. Three,
So,
2, 1.
Let me put you on game.
another interesting week in the NBA. And I was reflecting on the topic that we covered a few podcasts ago about the ESPN 25 under 25 and our thoughts on the list. And it had me thinking that, we should have this conversation around who are the top 5 players on that list that you would actually build your team around. So did you want to get started with a player who you think is deserving of a franchise cornerstone type of vibe?
Yeah, I guess we'll just start from the bottom of our list and we'll work our way to the top trade off. But my first player is gonna be Devin Booker of
Okay.
Phoenix Suns fame. I think he's a supremely talented scorer. I think he is the only player in the league right now that has 70 points in a game. Uh, he has a reputation thus far in his career as a empty stats guy or
Mm-hmm.
good stats, bad team, which is, as you know, and as anyone who's listened to the podcast knows, is my least favorite kind of description for any player because I think it's BS. But I think his role with the Phoenix Suns this year is showing that he is a winning player and he's contributing to winning basketball. So he's my number 5. Uh, what's
Okay.
the first player on your list? Let me
So,
go ahead and
and
guess. Is it a RJ Barrett, Frank Ntilikina, Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickly, and
yeah,
then RJ Barrett one more time?
yeah, let him know. Let him know. I mean, RJ obviously would get the honorable mention for me, but take it serious, I would say John Morant. He came in at number 5
Okay.
for me. He's still very young, and he's still developing his outside shot, but he has like this pop and wow factor that kind of makes him a easy draw. It's so fun to watch him, especially in the open court and the open floor. He zigs and zags through teams. He's like just 2 degrees faster than everybody on the court at all times. And he's also a great playmaker. His playmaking is superb. He uses his athletic abilities to not just outshine his teammates, but to really set them up, to get them open shots. He draws a lot of attention on the defense and forces defenses to adjust on him. So, in my eyes, he needs like more talent to be placed around him. And he also needs to develop his outside shot. But once he becomes at least a 35 to 38% 3-point shooter, he's going to be a problem. And he also has to work on his defense. He's like 120 in defensive win shares, which is real low. But
Yeah.
yeah, he's a burgeoning superstar in my eyes. In another 2-3 years, I think he's gonna really light the league on fire.
Yeah. I love Ja, man. I was really hoping we could move up the draft boards and get to him, man, because he's a dog, man, and he's a freak of nature athletically. I saw the
Yeah.
windmill he had last night.
Oh my god!
It was like almost looking in the rim like it was easy. Dude has crazy bunnies, but yeah, he's
Yeah.
he's definitely a guy to watch. My number 4 is gonna be Jaylen Brown. Uh,
Okay.
I think he's taken
Interesting.
a huge leap this year. Almost 25 a game, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Uh, I think he's progressed in a really astounding way offensively. I think he was
Mhm.
really raw offensively coming into the league, but he has improved his handle a lot, and that has helped open up his game. And he's an improved shooter. And I think he's also one of the better two-way players in the league.
Mm.
So I think that he's only 24, but I think you'll see him as he enters his prime. He'll be a consistent, 24 plus point per game scorer with added defense on the other end. So I'm a really big fan of Jaylen.
Okay. Yeah, nah, Jalen is fun to watch. He's super athletic and has definitely refined his game, from his high top days to now, just a overall all around, baller. And a great wingman with Jayson Tatum. But for me, number 4 has to go to Ben Simmons. And
Ben, yeah.
yeah, and I feel like Ben really gets overlooked, and it's kind of, it's kind of sad because he's a really good player. His defense, he's ninth in defensive win shares and eighth in defensive um plus or minus. And he I think he could literally be Giannis if he had a team that was built around him in the same way that Giannis does.
Mhm.
And Giannis was kind of given the keys to the franchise. He was clearly the best, player that Milwaukee had. And so they said, you know what? We know he can't shoot that well, so let's surround him with shooters, allow him to be the playmaker, and spread the floor around him. And I think Simmons could literally do that as well. He's just a tick shorter than Giannis. He's just about he's almost as athletic, as well as just astounding defense and a great playmaking ability. I think a slightly better passer than Giannis as well. It's just that he hasn't had the freedom and the spacing and maybe the time to also build confidence with his shot. And when you have Embiid on the floor, Embiid is such a dominant force that it's hard to not run your offense through him. So Simmons really is kind of pushed to the side, but he is super talented. And I think I could see him being, especially if maybe he really just gets the confidence to start jacking some outside shots. He could be a top 5 player in the league in my eyes. So that's why I see him as a franchise building block cornerstone.
Yeah, I like Ben. I think he's one of the best defensive players in the league. I think some part of it is just he's already he's already a really, really good NBA player.
Yeah.
And I think the frustration with him from a lot of people is that they see how much better he could be. Like if he was a competent mid-range and three-point shooter, it opens up his whole game, you know? And I think that offensively, people see so much more potential in him. And that's kind of why they're frustrated with his lack of progress in certain areas. And then that kind of gets in the way of them realizing the vast amount of things that he actually does do well.
Yeah.
Like he can really guard 1 through 4 and
Yeah.
some 5s, to be honest. Like I watched him, you know, lock up Damian Lillard at one point, which is
Gave
something
him
that's
fits.
crazy to think that some guy that's 6'10" could do. I think he's my defensive player of the year. But yeah, Ben was honorable mention on my list. I think he's one of the best young players in the league. I just hope that he's able to expand himself, like you said, offensively. Uh, Number 3, I mean, not any surprise to anyone that watches us or listens. Young Mac Truck, Zion Williamson is my
Yeah.
number 3. There's so much that you could say about Zion. I think the only thing that can stop him from being a franchise level talent for the rest of his career or being number 2 or number 1 on anyone's list is health. I think that the way that his body is built and, you watch him walk or you watch him run, sometimes it can be a little worrisome, but, and he's had his injury struggles early in his career. Hopefully those days are behind him. But when he is healthy and when he's in shape, I think he's one of the best players in the league, and he's only 21, I think. And it's just ridiculous to watch him sometimes because he'll shoot like 70% in a game, and that's like normal. He'll go 14 of 16 for like 35 points, and that's just like that's a regular night for him.
Yeah.
And then you have him literally bringing the ball down the court like a point guard, and he's 6'6", 285. Like I don't really understand what teams are supposed to do with that. I think the next step for him is probably creating jump shots off of the dribble and being a more consistent 3-point shooter. He shoots, I think, mid-30s from 3 right now, but on very, very low volume. So once that volume starts to go up and people start respecting him more from the perimeter and he starts creating more shots, I think he'll be even more unstoppable than he is now. So Zion is my number 3.
Okay. At number 3, I got interesting that you have Zion at number 3. At number 3, I have Jayson Tatum, actually.
Okay.
I think Jayson Tatum is definitely a player that you want to build a franchise around, especially and we're recording this podcast the day after he dropped 60 in a comeback win against the Spurs.
Mm.
The Celtics were down 32 that game, and this man led the team with 60 points in a comeback win in overtime. Almost made a game-winning shot in regulation, but poured it on a little bit more and iced the game with a free throw in the fourth quarter to give him 60 points. So wire to wire, I think that he's an excellent offensive player with an offensive superstar mindset and two-way ability. And he can really make a case, I think, for MVP in another couple years if he continues to develop at the rate that he's developing. His outside shot is strong. He has developed this step back 3-point shot that's really unguardable, and he shoots at a pretty high clip at 38% with high volume shooting. And he's also, he's good. He's 35th in the league in defensive win shares, so he has two-way ability, like I said, and he's still so young, and it's like I'm just really excited to see how he continues to develop. I know he had that early in his career, that mentorship from Kobe, so it's nice to see somebody with the Mamba mindset that's young, that's a wing, and that's doing his thing on a Boston Celtics team that really needs him to shine in order to have any chance to win. So he's definitely a franchise cornerstone in my eyes.
Yeah, for sure. And he's my number 2.
Okay.
So I mean, it's no surprise if you leave Jayson Tatum off your list is wrong, regardless of if it's an opinion or not. It's just wrong. But
okay.
You said everything already. He's also a really underrated defensive player as well. I think he's really good on that end, and I think he's also one of the best isolation scorers in the NBA, as far as a guy where you can just give it to him and without any movement from the offense, just say, go get me a bucket. And he's got it. His step back is one of the most deadly moves in the league. And he's got such a bright future, man. It's crazy to think that, we talk about the draft on here sometimes, but how much drafting the right player can change your franchise.
Yeah.
Because if you want to look at, I think he was 3rd in that draft behind Lonzo and Markelle Fultz. So, I mean, nothing against those guys. They've had their own issues and they're actually turning out to be good NBA players. But Jayson Tatum is a franchise level talent, a Hall of Famer if he keeps up, the current rate of production. And, talk about my Bulls, number 7, we had Lauri Markkanen, so that's the difference sometimes between, success for a franchise and mediocrity. And I think Jayson Tatum is, if you have him on your roster, I think that you are at least destined to compete. I think he's that level of a player. And I think him and Jaylen Brown together, I mean, that's 50 points a game between the two of them. And they're both two-way players. So I think that you have a really good foundation on the wing there. You just got to surround them with the requisite talent. But yeah, he's definitely my number 2. I really, really like Jayson Tatum.
Yeah. So number 2 for me is young Mac Truck, Mr. Zion Williamson. Okay. I feel like he has to be the number 2 because, like you said, his efficiency and his ability to get buckets is just astounding. His ability to bully grown men in the league in the paint on offense as well as on the offensive board is it's astounding to me, and you love to watch it. I think that he really needs a shooting pick and roll kind of point guard to help him open up his game some more, and someone that can really set him up on the pick and roll so that he can roll to the basket, get easy lobs, as well as someone who he could play off of, because once he develops his outside shot, he's really going to be unguardable. Because as a modern NBA 4, you have to be able to stretch the floor. But he doesn't even need to. Even if he stays where he is for the next 10 years, he'll be a top 10 player in the league without having developed anything else in his repertoire. But I have him at number 2 because he really needs to lean up. Although he's playing the full season, he's still Lord forgive me, he's still looking a little chunky. You know, he's still looking.
You won't let that die, will you? That's since he was drafted, that's the pedestal that you've been on.
Yeah, man, he is, like Rocket Raccoon said in Infinity War, he's one hamburger away from fat. And but like, all jokes aside, he has to, because he has to lean up in order to play adequate defense in the league.
Yeah.
As someone who was so sought after in the draft coming up, because we saw his effort on both ends of the floor. You saw some of the blocks that he got in college and high school. For him to kind of play the matador defense that he likes to play in the league, as well as being fourth in win shares on the offensive end, but then 113th in terms of defensive win shares in the league, it's kind of like, bro, what are you doing? Yeah. It's real stark. And it might be culture in NOLA with Stan Van Gundy being the coach. Maybe he's just not holding guys accountable, and maybe the guys aren't really listening to him on that end. But overall, he just has to, for me to be any higher on this list, and for him to be in the championship level pool that a player of his skill set should be able to push his team to, kind of like a Charles Barkley. Was able to get MVP, was able to get to the finals, was able to be an excellent player at 6'4" and power forward. He really needs to, I guess, if not lean up, just show more effort on both ends of the floor in order to kind of move up my list.
I feel you, but I think that, bringing up Charles Barkley, I feel like Charles had his own issues on that end as well. I think for me, the whole thing with Zion is going to just have to be longevity, because he is such an explosive athlete. That is a lot of weight to come down on his knees. And I think that that's probably going to be an issue later in his career. If he can get down to 265, 255, that might help him. But yeah, I think he's improving as he's improved as the season has gone on as far as defense, because it's the beginning of the season and last year it was a lot worse. And I think some of that is the injury, but also they've been working with him on how to basically realign the way that he moves. So that could be part of it. And I think that he's getting in better shape as he gets more responsibility. So Stan Van Gundy was talking about it and saying basically that they did want him to bring the ball up a lot more earlier in the season, but he wasn't in the kind of shape to do that, because, a lot of times being in the kind of shape to be a point guard versus being in the kind of shape to be a power forward are different,
Yeah.
So I think that now that he's getting more responsibility on that end and his body is kind of coming together, I think that you may see a more lean Zion. But I don't know. I never saw Zion as fat. I saw him as, he's not necessarily as thin as other basketball players in terms of his body fat levels, but I never really saw him as fat. I think you could say his body fat is lower than like Shaq's was in LA. He's probably like Orlando Shaq in terms of his body fat. He's just a lot bigger, like in terms of his actual muscular size. But it'll be interesting. I think Zion's development is going to be one of the most interesting things to watch in the NBA. But to get to my number one,
do you want to announce the number one at the same time?
Yeah, sure. It's no surprise. 3, 2, 1. Luka Doncic.
It's not, yeah, like, what do you want?
It's not any surprise. It's ridiculous, man. Like 28, 8 and 8. The entire offense revolves around him. He is one of the slower players in the league, but it doesn't matter because he's a master of playing the angles, and he's one of the smartest basketball players, and he's definitely one of the most skilled. So he's incredible to watch, man. I remember, we've been talking about the draft for most of this segment, but I do remember his draft. I remember all of the criticisms, and I remember so much doubt about him. And he's got to be one of the most divisive players, especially in terms of what people thought he was going to be. versus what he is now, like
Mm,
I don't think anyone saw European James Harden because he coming from the Euro League, like he was averaging like 14 a game, which is good for that particular league, but it wasn't anything like incredible. But to watch his development as an NBA player, like we've talked about guys on this list and they have a chance to be perennial all-stars. They have a chance to be Hall of Famers. Luka has a chance to be one of the GOATs.
mm.
Like that's a different, entirely different level of accomplishment and of talent because he is as good of a
Yeah.
scorer as the rest of the guys on his list, but his ability to create for others and his savant level playmaking is what separates him from all the other guys on this list. But yeah, Luka's that's a bad boy, man.
Yeah,
That's
he
a
is.
bad dude.
I mean, offensively, he's really in, I would say he's in the GOAT conversation because his skill set, I know people like to compare him to a Larry Bird, in terms of just his
Yeah.
overall game. And, Larry Bird was one of the GOATs before Jordan stepped on the scene. Um, and he was in that
Still is.
conversation.
Still is.
I mean, he still is, but he's kind of pushed out of,
Like
our
the top
memory.
three. Yeah.
Yeah, because of just so many other great players that have come after him, especially wings with Jordan or LeBron. But he's already an offensive superstar. It's his third year in the league, and he's an offensive superstar. The likes that we haven't seen since LeBron James, to be honest, in terms of just offensive uber talent. And he's just getting started. To me, he needs more 3-and-D guys around him. And maybe a guy off the bench that could also spell him sometimes and allow him to maybe move off the ball could really open up his team and his game to like a whole nother level. But it's not necessary for them to make the playoffs and to be competitive in the West, even with the talent that they have around him, which is really solid, but in some ways still needs some better pieces. He still needs some
Yeah.
better pieces. And what's also underrated is I looked up his defensive stats. He's 30th in the league in defensive win shares and 32nd in defensive box plus minus, which kind of gives you an overall sense of the player's feel on the court. And so he's a savant on offense, and has enough court awareness to play adequate positional defense.
Yeah, he's
And
competent. Yeah.
he's competent, and that's all you can hope for someone who carries the offensive load as much as he does.
Yeah.
And so I really see him as, like you said, he could be in the GOAT conversation if he just continues this level of efficiency for the next 10, 15 years. He will be in the GOAT conversation. That's
Yeah.
really long into the future, and it's a very far projection, but this kid has the juice. And so, yeah, Luka for number one. This kid is a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. If he ever becomes a 40 percentage 3-point shooter, it's over.
So
It's over.
yeah.
But yeah, that's our top 5 players. Go ahead and shoot us an email, man. Tell us what your top 5 players are under the
Yeah.
age of 25.